Now, Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce, been a busy bloke and hopefully he's about to go on holidays sometime soon, and he's earned it. Unlike the Prime Minister, the National Party vote went up at this election. In fact, they got an extra seat, they got an extra spot in Cabinet. And we didn't just talk about the election result, we also talked about an idea that New Zealand have just announced where they are going to get rid of introduced species to that country that end up becoming vermin. We talk about that and a whole lot more. Oh yeah, and Kevin Rudd, tomorrow there'll be that big meeting of the Cabinet. What's Barnaby Joyce say about that bloke going to the UN? We spoke earlier today when I had a different shirt on. Deputy Prime Minister, g'day and congratulations on the great result for the Nats at the election.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it was a good team effort and we did well. We picked up a seat and, well, that's what we're here for, try and make sure we win, try and make sure we serve our people, try and make sure it's not for us, we deliver back to them. I hope that we can fulfil all the promises that we made and make sure that we make their lives a bit better by reason of us being in politics.
Now, I'll mention for one last time two words that hopefully you never get to hear again, that being Tony Windsor. First, congratulations on wiping the floor with him. But secondly, today, the money came out about how much individual candidates and parties get from the Australian Electoral Commission. Rob Oakeshott, who only ran for 3 weeks, he's going to get $70,000, and the bloke who you ground into the dust, he's going to get $72,000. It's fine that there are election expenses that need to be put in place, but what is the disincentive for somebody with an ego like Tony Windsor's or an ego like Rob Oakeshott's not to pop up and cause harm every 3 years in exchange for $70,000?
We do at times get serial candidates, and it's fair enough to say everybody gets paid $2.62, but we assign it to a party, and that party has a public office and has staff, and you can walk into that office and say good day to them if you want. But sometimes it is a bit perturbing when you find someone who actually gets the money and assigns it to themselves. Now, I've no doubt that Mr. Windsor's paid more than $72,000 for the campaign, but if you add up his donations and what he got, then I suppose the ultimate question is he ahead or behind? I don't know. We'll probably find out later on, but you know, that's politics. To be quite frank, and this sounds really odd, I'm less concerned about Mr. Windsor, who I know they had a massive campaign, as to Mr. Oakeshott, who appeared just merely weeks before the electorate, and he's got himself $70,000. I don't know how he could have spent even close to $70,000.
Well, correct. My favourite of all of the expenses that he tried to give to the media was $5,000 for volunteer expenses. I thought volunteering cost nothing, but anyway. Now, I want to talk about, again, the election result. One of the reasons that I've been looking forward to talking to you since the election was the National Party held ground. In fact, it increased. The Liberal Party went backwards, but the Conservative vote, 1.9 million people voted for someone other than the LNP in the Senate. Now, this is a bigger number than was around 3 years ago when Clive Palmer was there. Yes, Pauline Hanson is a big bit of it, but as a Conservative, as a straight shooter, what can your team do to regain people who walked away at this election?
Well, you respect the fact that people cast their vote, and they cast their vote, they meant what they said. So if they're voting for Ms Hanson or anybody else, then what does that mean about where the political aspiration of the people are? You know, you just respect the fact that they're not fools. They know why they voted for these people. There are certain concerns that they have, and in some instances you've got to make sure you address them. Maybe you don't address them in the same form as a Ms Hanson or other parties do, but you respect the concerns that they have, and you don't just dismiss them or belittle them. You say, okay, I hear what you're saying. I know you've got a concern about social cohesion, you've got a concern about immigration, you've got a concern about jobs into the future. Okay, I understand that. But the job we've got to do is make sure we explain our position, not say to people who bring these issues up, oh, well, you're a xenophobe or you're a redneck. Say, no, I hear your concerns. I'm now going to explain to you how we're making sure that we've got strong borders. I'm going to explain to you how we make sure that we've got jobs into the future. To be quite frank with you, I can't go to the extent that you want me to go, but I'm going to show you that we are not blind to the issues and the concerns that you have. Now, that's our job as politicians, and in our debates with, because it's a political forum, the Parliament, our debates with Ms Hanson or anybody else, it's not going to be a case of just screaming at the person and saying, how dare you speak. It's a case of us saying to them, well, what is your point? Let's go through the facts. Let's have the debate. Let's do it in a calm and methodical manner. and the Australian people can be the judge. That's how I see it, Paul. On our basis at a national party level, we try to do this in any case. We try to do it basically more on a sort of one-on-one approach on the street, and that's how we try to get our message out.
Now, when we put up on the Facebook page that you were coming up on the show tonight, a lot of people jump on, keen to hear from you, all the rest of it. But there was quite a few who wanted to talk about, the selling off of Australia, privatisation of things. You know that this is a very regular theme. It's one that Bob Katter is very loud on. What do you think is the reality of what government can do when an individual owner of a business wants to sell it to the highest bidder, and if the highest bidder is Chinese, what do you do?
Well, you have to ask the question of is how the interests of our nation protected. I have obviously concerns, and I've expressed them in the past about the proportion of Australian land and how much is owned by people from overseas, especially when it goes to state-owned enterprises, which are really arms of another nation's government. Now, I've expressed that, and that concern is not that unusual. It's the same concern that the Foreign Investment Review Board has, and that's why their reflection of that concern comes that a state-owned enterprise merely has to buy $1 worth of land and has to go for review. I was also welcomed the statements by the Treasurer, Scott Morrison, the other day on the Productivity Commission when they said, that there should be changes to the Foreign Investment Review Board, and he, I think, has quite clearly said, well, we're quite happy with the conditions that we've got. And why? Because it's the view of exactly how you said it, Paul, the Australian people. They say, look, your first job number one, is to make sure that this nation maintains the basic integrity, that the ownership of this nation is fundamentally and without dispute held by the Australian people. Other people may have the great privilege of buying something in our land, but it is not their right. That goes unquestioned. It is absolutely our right to have an oversight over that, and where we choose to say no, and in the past we have, ADM and Kidman Company being two recent examples, we will say no. We will say in this instance it's our right to say no. We're not going to allow you to buy that particular asset. Now, the question you asked at the start is about the individual. Says, well, I want my right to sell it to whomever throughout the world at the best possible price. Well, if that was the same condition that started when they went into business, maybe they would never have started. They've had the great been the great beneficiary of this nation, of all the infrastructure and the protections and that comes with this nation, and therefore the nation has a right to ask certain things back, and that is that it has the overwhelming say about who owns what within it.
Two quick ones before we finish up here. New Zealand made an interesting announcement in this week, and it's been overshadowed by some of the big terrorism events and other things around, is that New Zealand is going to go after introduced species that have become predators. We're talking things like possums, rats, plenty of others. Now, they're an island nation, yes, a smaller island nation, but is there any merit in a national conversation in Australia about trying to eradicate introduced pests a little more effectively and, frankly, a little more brutally?
Okay, and yeah, I think there is, but I'll give you a classic example where we've already done it on some Australian territory. Cats and rats down on Macquarie Island, we got rid of them, and that's a clear example that you can do it if your motivation is absolutely precise. And I remember pushing for that when I was a mere backbencher, trying to make sure we got the funding for it. We're about to release we have released the Khaleesi virus, K5, because it comes from Korea. Which will put another huge dent into the rabbit population, and of course the carp herpes virus, which we'll release, and once that gets released into the waterways, we'll see up to 2 million tonnes of carp that will rise to the surface belly up for us to scoop them up and turn them into fertiliser in the fields. These are part of the process of finding the biological controls to make sure that we get better integrity into the biota, into the environmental structure of where we are, and things like wild dogs, cats. If you like our native fauna and flora, don't support cats, don't support wild dogs, because they just clean them up. They do vastly more damage than any hunters or anything else. They're absolutely devastating.
And just finally here, tomorrow is going to be a meeting of the Cabinet. You'll discuss whether or not Kevin Rudd should get the big tick to go off to the UN. I will simply ask you in a Shakespearean fashion, Deputy Prime Minister, to Rudd or not to Rudd? That is the question. What do you reckon?
I'm sure there'll be a lot of hypothesising about that in the papers tomorrow, but I'll leave my deliberations for Cabinet. I think it's going to be a hard-run thing no matter what. There are a whole range of very good candidates who are sticking their hand up for that job, and let's have our discussion in Cabinet tomorrow.
All right, good man. Well, I'm pretty sure that you know the way most of us feel. Enjoy the discussion tomorrow, and we'll talk to you soon. And get a break too, mate, because well done on the election result, and looking forward to seeing you back in Parliament in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, Paul. Good on you, mate.